The first time Princess Aelira heard the human speak, he thought he was completely alone. He stood on the observation balcony of the Imperial Station, staring out at the blue spiral of the nebula that surrounded their world. The lights of thousands of ships drifted slowly in the distance like silent stars. The palace behind him was quiet. He didn't know someone else was there. Hidden in the shadow of a tall crystalline pillar, Princess Aelira listened without meaning to. "I didn't come here for diplomacy," the human murmured softly to himself. "I came here to save her." Aelira froze. Her silver eyes widened. Save who? The human, Commander Daniel Hart, was supposed to be an Earth ambassador, a decorated officer sent to negotiate peace between humanity and the powerful Arcanes Empire. And Aelira was the princess of that empire. She had only met him twice. Both times he had been polite, respectful, and strangely calm in front of the intimidating royal court. But now his voice sounded different. Raw. Honest. "I know the Empire thinks they're invincible," Daniel continued quietly, gripping the balcony rail. "But they don't know what's coming." Aelira felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "What's coming?" Daniel lowered his head. "And she doesn't deserve to die with them." Aelira's breath caught. For a moment, she thought about stepping forward and revealing herself. But something told her not to move. "Not yet." Daniel sighed heavily. "I promised myself I wouldn't get involved," he whispered. "But after meeting her, after seeing the way she looks at the stars..." His voice softened. "I can't let her die." Aelira's heart began beating faster. Her mind raced. Was he talking about someone in the royal court? A servant? A diplomat? Then Daniel said the words that made her entire world tilt. "Princess Aelira deserves to live." Aelira nearly gasped out loud. Her hand covered her mouth just in time. Daniel pushed away from the balcony and began walking back toward the palace corridors, completely unaware that the princess he had just spoken about had heard every word. That night, Aelira couldn't sleep. The glowing ceiling of her chamber slowly shifted colors, mimicking the distant stars of the galaxy. Normally the sight calmed her. Tonight, it only made her thoughts louder. "He came here to save me." The idea made no sense. Humans were still new to the galactic stage. Their species had only developed faster than light travel a few decades earlier. Compared to the ancient Arcanes Empire, humanity was still young. Weak. Yet Daniel had spoken with certainty. They don't know what's coming. Aelira sat up in bed. Her long silver hair fell over her shoulders like liquid moonlight. What could threaten the Empire? The Arcanes fleet controlled thousands of systems. Their warships were unmatched. Their technology centuries ahead of most civilizations. And yet, Daniel sounded like someone who had already seen the future. Finally, Aelira made a decision. She would confront him. The next day, she found him in the palace library. Daniel stood near a floating display of star maps, studying them carefully. He looked different outside of the formal diplomatic halls. His uniform jacket was off, his sleeves rolled up. For a moment, Aelira simply watched him. He looked human, tired, thoughtful, almost lonely. Then she spoke. "Commander Hart." Daniel turned quickly. When he saw her, his eyes widened in surprise. "Princess." He straightened immediately. "I didn't expect to see you here." Aelira stepped closer. "I could say the same." Daniel smiled slightly. "I like quiet places." Aelira studied him carefully. "Does he know that I know?" She decided to test him. "What were you doing on the observation balcony last night?" she asked casually. Daniel froze. For the briefest moment. Then he shrugged. "Just thinking." Aelira crossed her arms. "Thinking about saving someone?" His expression changed. The calm mask slipped. "Princess, what do you mean?" Aelira stepped closer until they were only a few feet apart. Her silver eyes locked onto his. "I heard everything." Daniel went completely still. Silence filled the vast library. Floating lights drifted slowly between the shelves. Finally, he exhaled. "So you heard my confession?" "Yes." Another pause. Then Alira asked the question that had been burning inside her all night. "What is coming?" Daniel hesitated. His gaze drifted toward the star map. "You won't like the answer." "Try me." Daniel looked back at her. For the first time since she had met him, he didn't look like an ambassador. He looked like a soldier. "A war," he said quietly. Alira frowned. "The Empire has faced wars before. Not like this one." Daniel tapped the star map. The image shifted, zooming toward the dark region beyond the Empire's borders. 3 months ago, he explained, a human exploration fleet disappeared here. That happens sometimes in deep space. Not like this. He expanded the map again. Hundreds of faint red markers appeared. These signals were picked up before the fleet went silent. Alira's eyes narrowed. "Unknown ships." Daniel nodded. "Thousands of them." A chill ran through her. "That's impossible." "That's what we thought too." He turned toward her. "Until another civilization near that region was wiped out 2 weeks later." Alira felt the weight of his words. "Completely destroyed?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Planets, cities, fleets, gone." The library suddenly felt colder. "What species?" "The Vekari." Alira's breath caught. The Vekari alliance had been powerful, nearly as strong as the Arcani's empire. "If they were destroyed," she whispered. Daniel finished the thought. Then the Empire might be next. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Alira stared at the star map. Her mind struggled to process the idea. "Why didn't you tell the council?" she asked. Daniel gave a bitter smile. "I tried." And they laughed. Alira wasn't surprised. The Imperial Council rarely took warnings from younger civilizations seriously. "Your empire believes it is untouchable," Daniel said quietly. "And you don't. No civilization is." Alira looked back at him. "Then why did you say you came to save me?" Daniel hesitated. For a long moment he didn't answer. Finally he spoke softly. "Because when this war starts, your empire won't be ready." "And you think I'm important enough to rescue?" Daniel met her gaze. "You're not just important." His voice lowered. "You're the only leader in this empire who actually listens." Alira blinked. "That's a strange compliment." "It's the truth." Daniel walked to the star map again. "I've watched your speeches. Your policies. You care about people outside your empire. And that matters?" "Yes." He turned toward her again. "Because if the empire falls, someone like you might be the only one capable of rebuilding what's left." Alira stared at him. "You're planning for our collapse." "I'm preparing for the worst." Silence stretched between them. Then Alira said quietly, "And if you're wrong?" Daniel shrugged. "Then I'll happily look like a paranoid human." Alira studied him for a long time. Then she asked something unexpected. "Why risk your career for me?" Daniel looked surprised. "You overheard that part too?" "Yes." He looked down at the floor for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Because you reminded me of someone." "Who?" "My sister." Alira tilted her head slightly. "She died 5 years ago." "I'm sorry." Daniel nodded. "She believed people could do better. That civilizations didn't have to destroy each other." He looked back up. "You have that same look in your eyes." Alira didn't know what to say. No one had ever compared her to a human before. Finally she asked, "What's your plan?" Daniel blinked. "My plan?" "Yes. If the council won't listen, we make them." Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel and Alira worked in secret. Together they studied the mysterious signals. They analyzed ancient records. They contacted hidden allies across the galaxy. Slowly, a terrifying pattern began to emerge. The unknown fleet wasn't simply invading worlds. It was erasing civilizations. Entire star systems were going dark, and they were moving closer. Every day, Aelira began to realize something disturbing.
Daniel had been right.
The Empire truly wasn't prepared. Its fleets were powerful but slow to mobilize. Its leaders were confident but arrogant. Worst of all, they refused to believe the threat was real. Until the day the first border colony went silent. The news spread through the Empire like wildfire. By the time the Council finally acknowledged the danger, it was already too late. Unknown warships had entered Imperial space, and they were unstoppable. The final Council meeting before the invasion was chaos. Admirals shouted. Ministers argued. Holographic displays flashed warnings from every corner of the Empire. Princess Aelira stood at the center of it all. Beside her stood Daniel, one human among dozens of powerful alien leaders. Finally, the Emperor spoke. What do you propose, daughter? Aelira took a breath. She looked at Daniel, then back at the Council. We listened to the human. The chamber erupted with protests. But Daniel stepped forward calmly. For centuries, he said, you believed your empire was the strongest force in the galaxy. He gestured toward the star map. You were wrong. Silence slowly returned. These enemies don't conquer, Daniel continued. They erase. One of the admirals scoffed. And you think humans can stop them? Daniel smiled slightly.
No.
The room fell silent again. But we can help you survive. Aelira stepped forward. And survival is enough for now. The Emperor looked at them both carefully. Finally, he said one word. Explain. And for the first time, the Empire began to listen. The ending. Months later, the war for the galaxy had begun. The unknown invaders were still powerful, still terrifying, but they had not expected one thing. Unity. Humans. Arcanis. Dozens of other civilizations. Together they formed an alliance unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And at the center of that alliance stood two unlikely figures. A human commander and an alien princess. One evening, long after the first great battle had been won, Aelira stood once again on the observation balcony where everything had started. Daniel joined her. Funny, he said, leaning on the railing. This is where you overheard my big secret. Aelira smiled slightly. You weren't very quiet. I thought I was alone. You rarely are in a palace. They watched the stars together for a moment. Finally, Aelira said softly, You never did explain something. What's that? Why you truly came here? Daniel looked at her. I told you. To save me? He shook his head gently. That was only part of it. Aelira raised an eyebrow. Then what was the other part? Daniel smiled. I came because I hoped someone in this empire would be brave enough to change its future. Aelira looked back at the stars. And was I? Daniel's answer came without hesitation. Yes. She turned toward him. And what about your sister? Daniel's smile softened. I think she would have liked you. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Aelira said quietly, I'm glad I overheard your confession. Daniel laughed softly. So am I. Above them, the stars of the galaxy shone brightly. And for the first time in centuries, those stars belonged not to a single empire, but to a united galaxy ready to fight for its future.